From Canada Place at Expo 86, welcome to week 93 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Vancouver, British Columbia welcomes Prince Charles, Diana, the Princess of Wales, Mila Mulrooney, and Prime Minister Brian Mulroney to Expo 86.
Welcome to week 93 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
Expo 86 opened on Friday, and it was opened by Prince Charles and Princess Diana. And guess where they were on Saturday? They were in Kelowna. So I met Prince Charles on Saturday. And as I was walking to the park to meet the royal couple, I passed by the Paramount Theatre in Kelowna, which was playing the movie Blue City, starring Ali Sheedy and Rob Lowe. And I thought that was kind of funny because there was a troupe of police officers all dressed in blue getting ready to do security for the royal couple's arrival. So it really was a Blue City in Kelowna on Saturday, May 3rd, 1986.
And I actually saw Charles and Diana in Vancouver, exiting the Pan Pacific Hotel with a whole stream of dignitaries around them, including the Canadian Prime Minister at the time, who was Brian Mulroney. And I just remember being very thrilled to see them because, of course, this was their first big event, really, as a married couple. And Diana, I think, was wearing a very striking blue outfit, if I recall, and they were very glamorous. So that's my primary memory from Expo 86.
I was looking for footage, and it appears to me that they were in Vancouver at the end of last week, and then zipped to Kelowna for Saturday, went to Prince George on Sunday, and then back to Vancouver on Monday for more events and more. I think they actually did the ribbon cutting on the Monday, but there was the opening ceremonies as well that they attended, and some various dinners, and other dignitaries that were there were Brian Mulroney and his wife, and of course Premier Bill Bennett and his wife, and I didn't see Jim Pattison with them, but he was probably around too. So that's what happened over the weekend, and I now have a job. I am working at the Math Assistance Center at Okanagan College, and so unfortunately I will not be able to see Santa Barbara all summer. I will have to set up my audio tape recorder to record it, and I once again have to make the heart-rending decision as to whether or not to record Santa Barbara or whether or not to record Another World. And I think this may be the summer where I decided to record Another World, so I may have some episodes over the summer that I didn't hear or see. So this episode doesn't sound familiar at all as we watched it. Episode 450. Hey, this is our 450th episode, and we had a special guest all lined up. But instead of watching the episode with us and doing the podcast, she went to yoga instead. So if we're lucky, she may join us for the next episode as our special guest. Mary checks into a nunnery, and we do meet Mother Isabel immediately after she's let in by that sister Anne, I think it was, who let her in on Friday. Mark and Mason, of course, are trying to find Mary. Cece tells Mason to forget about Mary, but Mason says he has new information that tells him that Mary doesn't have a real marriage. So basically confirming that it was Mason that Mason had broken into Mark's medical records, which we had fairly reasonably suspected. Mary tells Mark by phone that she's moved into the convent for a little while, and Mark says, "You can't be a part-time wife and a part-time nun." Unless we get a lot better line than that. That's going to be our episode title for the week. Mark gets a call telling him his medical records have been broken into, and he immediately suspects Mason and confronts him. And then he lies to Mason, saying, "Oh yeah, Mary stopped by earlier, everything's fine, she's not missing." Mason's like, "I didn't see her car at all." He says, "Don't hassle her anymore, anywhere, we're moving back east." So I think Mark is, being pushed towards the edge, I think.
Yeah.
I think he may be flipping out at some point soon if things keep getting weird like this. Having your wife check into a nunnery is generally not a good sign.
No. So I think we'll see a trifecta of Mark, Kirk, and Dylan all going nuts, possibly during these May sweeps.
That sounds very reasonable. I don't know why I wouldn't have recorded those episodes. And it's weird to me, it never occurred to me to try and buy a VCR. Like, I didn't even have a sense of how much they were, even though I had probably borrowed one once from a video store to watch a movie. Dylan, as you'll recall, has his hand over Kelly's mouth and says he just wants to read her his letter. And she agrees to let him read it if he'll take his hand off her mouth. And he reads, as you might expect, a long, winding letter about how they're meant to be together, etc. Kelly spends the time flashbacking to that time Peter raped her and remembering that she has a knife under her pillow and trying to inch towards it. When Dylan finishes, he comes to her to profess his love, and she stabs him! But unfortunately, it's only in the leg.
However, I mean, this is not the first time she's threatened him with a knife, so slow learner.
I think she's working her way up to the May Sweeps murder. Justin takes him to a doctor and then to the ferry because Dylan says he's got something to do with the casino. And I just feel like he's just going to burn it down because I can't imagine anything he's really got to do with the casino.
No.
So maybe we'll find out tomorrow what Dylan really has to do with the casino. The only other thing I can think is that he will somehow annoy Brick with some information or threat. Nick actually shows up at the ferry because someone at Buzz has mentioned that they saw Dylan bandaged up being taken to the ferry. Has a brief, as you might expect, conversation with Dylan, and Dylan tells him to get off the boat. He wants to get going. And Justin warns him not to go and see Kelly. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't. Justin returns to Kelly, and Kelly tells Justin that she realizes now that Dylan didn't want to harm her, just read the letter, but her thoughts about Peter made it hard to think straight. So this might have to be her defense.
Yeah.
I found it hard to think straight when I stabbed Dylan in the heart. She asks Justin to play the saxophone for her. And instead of something soothing, he picks a blaring song. At least that's what it looked like to me. I don't know if Larry Poindexter is actually playing saxophone or if, one of these musical people of Santa Barbara is laying in a track after the fact. So it's May. That's moving ahead.
Mm-hmm,
So something will happen to Dylan, I'm fairly sure, very soon, I hope.
Yeah, we'll all enjoy that.
And then we'll see what Kelly's life will be like as she tries to sort out, does she want Nick, does she want Justin, or
does she want an apartment in New York?
At the cabana, Nick radios that Kirk is at the back door. He sneaked past me somehow.
Nick is everywhere this episode.
Cruz pulls his gun, and he and Eden pretend to be having an affair. Their dialogue, not their actions, while they wait for the back door to open. Mason barges in the front door looking for Mary. Oh. Cruz has heard him coming up the path and manages to hide. Mason finds only Eden and wonders if she's meeting someone there, and Eden says, "Please, do not tell anyone I was here." I think Mason suspects she was probably meeting Cruz, right? Mm-hmm. Because first she says, "Are you meeting Kirk?" And then he puts things together pretty quickly. He's pretty smart. But Kirk is still listening to this at the door, so he knows that Eden asked Mason not to tell anyone she was there. And then Kirk leaves. Cruz tells Eden to pack a bag and fly to Hawaii and make up some story about a meeting. Ted!
I should mention during this time when they're kind of talking, she does sort of feel him out a little bit about what their status might be if they do manage to find a way to get rid of Kirk.
Mm.
And she says, well, we could be together. And not entirely, entirely on board with that, I think. Because I think he does take his marriage vows to Santana seriously.
Yeah. Ted is banging on one of the bedroom doors upstairs at the Lockridges. Can't tell if it's Lincoln's room or Gusta's old room with all that furniture gone. Gina is hiding behind that locked door. Haley lures Ted downstairs by saying, I think someone's down here. And then she sneaks up the back stairs to talk to Gina. And she basically tells Gina she's not going to lie to Ted anymore. And Gina begs her to keep her secret. Ted comes back upstairs as Gina hides around a corner and is relieved to hear that Haley does not reveal to Ted that she is alive and living in the Lockridge house. But you can see on Haley's face she's really upset, to avoid directly answering Ted's question about, did you see anyone up here? Ted says he'll tell his dad to get more security. So Gina's days of freedom at the Lockridge house might be numbered. At the house, Cece wants to give Ted a hard time about still seeing Haley and orders him into the study, and Ted says, no, remember we have a deal. I have my own autonomous life. Cece says, can't believe I ever made that deal. Kirk returns home to find that Cece has accidentally opened the fake receipt from the jeweler, which doesn't really matter for Kirk's plan, and he goes, that's fine.
Actually in his favor.
Mason comes in and asks Kirk if he's seen Mary. Kirk says no, and then Kirk asks Mason if he's seen Eden. And Mason says no, and Kirk says, you're a liar. He tells Cece that Eden is having an affair. None of you can be believed. It doesn't surprise me that she turned out this way. Eden shows up after Kirk leaves, and Cece asks her if she is having an affair. And she says, has Kirk said something to you? Which is not the same as a no. He's just upset. Cece shows her the $20,000 receipt for the necklace. And Eden notices the date and time is the same as when she was being murdered by Gina. She calls the jeweler, and he tells her that Kirk was there that night with him for over 2 hours. So Eden starts to have second thoughts about maybe they are making a mistake with Kirk.
And this little scene actually ends up with her having a bit of a breach with CC, because CC just says, I am so disappointed in you. And I think he's seen in her behavior, or what he assumes to be her behavior, similar to behavior of Sophia with Lionel. So it's probably a little bit of deja vu for him, and he is not happy about it.
Kirk congratulates Gina on the necklace that she picked out. He says that he just blew up at Cece. He hadn't intended to, but he thinks it's for the best because he's going to chew out Gina about having Eden about having an affair. Gina says that he probably can't even give Eden what she is getting from Cruz, mentally, emotionally, or physically. She suggests his feminine heart is not strong enough to power him physically. She says, I wish we had an oxygen tent available. We could give it a trial run. So even though he's been trying to kill her for a while, I think she actually might be into sleeping with Kirk. He says she disgusts him, which is interesting. It seems he's really all in over Eden. She suggests maybe he needs a few more transplants to get himself back in full form. And he clutches his chest out after she leaves the room. over the stress. So maybe some foreshadowing about...
how this might be resolved.
When Kirk gets home, he finds Eden on the phone, canceling her flight to Hawaii. And she pretends that the Waltons had canceled a business meeting. And then Eden shows Cruz the receipt and wonders if they've got it all wrong, and that Kirk is just jealous of Cruz. She tells him, don't worry, she has the beeper and she won't let Kirk touch her. Kirk asks Eden to come up to bed with him, and as they walk up the stairs, Eden says, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. And Kirk says, you're here now. So, hopefully Eden will manage not to sleep with Kirk, but I don't know.
We'll find out.
Things could go awry. They are married. That is it for this episode. It's kind of easy to break into pieces. No theme song in this episode or anything. So, busy week in the world. Chernobyl's still happening. Spreading radiation all over Europe. The royal couple zipping all over Canada. And we'll be back after we've seen episode 451 with a special guest. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back to Misha Dianne and Tanya Watch Santa Barbara. We have our special guest for episode 451 of the show. And we watched episode 451 of Santa Barbara earlier, last night, I think, which originally aired Tuesday, May 6th, 1986. Now, before we talk about the show, last weekend, the 3rd of May, I mentioned to our viewers that Prince Charles and Princess Diana came to Kelowna, and I met Prince Charles on Saturday. Did you meet anyone? No? You didn't?
No.
You didn't come downtown?
I don't know.
You don't remember meeting Princess Diana? All right. How old were you? You weren't that young.
How old were you?
Well, I was back from college, so I was like 18, 19. You were like 10?
I didn't meet them.
Okay.
I don't remember.
You just stayed home. Pretty sure you and Mom were on the Diana side. I was on the Charles side. Kirk gets Eden to sleep in the bed with him, but she refuses to have sex with him. He tells her he knows that she and Cruz have been lying to him and they should have a baby. Eden says, I'm not going to have a baby just to fix a problematic relationship. If I ever have a baby, it will be because I want to give love to someone else. So, Kirk is, of course, insane whenever he's not chatting with Eden, as we know from his various conversations with Gina, but he seems to Eden to be very calm and collected, and I think this is getting her to wrongly think that maybe he is not the one who tried to kill her several weeks ago.
She's letting her guard down, I think.
Mason calls Nick's, that's the name of the casino, looking for Mary. Then he calls Christy. We haven't heard from Christy in a while. And of course, she'll never be on the show again, but it was nice to see another reference to Christy after all these weeks. Then he calls someone and he speaks Spanish to them. So that was an interesting twist. Then he gets Tim, who we've heard from before and we think is just a detective that he gets to work on things from time to time. He calls Tim and asks him to track down Mary. Mason asks Kirk, what time does Mary usually show up for your physical therapy? And Kirk says, Mary is married! Or doesn't that mean anything to you either? So this is funny because so far it's really only been Cece that's been annoyed with Mason for going after Mary. We see that Kirk is actually just as annoyed. Mason says, did that come from Madeline's heart? You may have caught on that Kirk has recently had a heart transplant from the late Madeline Capwell, who David Laurent is on trial for murdering. Mark shows up at the convent and tries to get Mary to come home, and she convinces him to let her stay at the convent after assuring him that there's no way Mason would ever visit her there because he doesn't know where she is. So, I think it's kind of interesting. How long is Mary going to be in this convent? And have people visiting her. Augusta comes home from a long shift at the casino and complaining to Julia that Dylan showed up in the middle of the night wanting something. I forget what she said. And then Mason phoned first thing in the morning looking for Mary. Julia asks, why are you still working there when you got your divorce settlement from Lionel and you're very wealthy? And she says, well, I do own 20% of the casino. So we had 100%, and 40% was Cece's, and 40% was Lionel's, and 10% was Dylan's. Missing a 10%. Anyway, Dylan sold his shares to Cece, and then Lionel got divorced, so 20% went to Augusta, and then Cece stole Lionel's shares. So I think it's 20% Augusta, 80% Cece owning that casino now.
So we don't really know why Dylan went there, though, do we?
No, we never found out. We were like, he was so weird, we thought he was going to burn the place down. Oh, maybe it was 10% Sam, 10% Dylan.
Maybe.
And Sam also sold his shares to Cece. So. Then Augusta's annoyed when Julia dumps David Laurent, who's on trial for murdering Madeline, at her apartment for a few hours, or their apartment for a few hours. She says, he's an accused murderer. I could have been tomorrow's headline. Who's next? The Marquis de Sade and John Wilkes Booth? She thinks that Julia might be falling for David. She says, this is Jack Lee all over again. So I think this is not entirely a surprise to us, because I think we've noticed Julia seems to be interested in him somewhat.
Yeah, and she definitely has a history of maybe not having the best judgment when it comes to men, because as we remember, she was very briefly, flirting with Dylan.
That's right, on his first episode. And Dylan's gone nuts since then. Julia says, oh, did you have a nice meeting with Cassie last night? Played by Tina Louise. She says she kind of went back on the story that she told me after your meeting. You seem to cast quite a spell over the ladies. And then Julia is flustered when he replies, not all the ladies, I'm afraid. So I think Julia took that as an indication that he might be interested in her, because his wife's been dead for a whole 3 weeks now. Maybe 2.
And he may have murdered her.
And he may have murdered her. Julia tells him that shows him Madeline's will that left him everything. He says, wow, this would look really bad if the prosecution had it. Wait, why don't they have it? Didn't they find it in the search? And she says, it may not have been there by the time they got there. So it looks like Julia stole some evidence from not the crime scene, but from David's study, I guess, back east. I don't know. Did she fly back east? And, or maybe she had her will here in Santa Barbara somewhere. I don't know. That's weird. I thought she said it was in the lawyer's office back east. So. Either way, David says, well, wait a minute. I would have destroyed it if I was the murderer. And she goes, yeah, you're right. It was probably planted by the real murderer. Because he does say the witness signatures look weird to him. So he's maybe wondering if the whole will is fake.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this may be a new tact to try to prove that the will is fake. But the original information that Madeline was about to take him out of the will came from her lawyer originally. So, and he would have had to have drawn up the paper. So I can't see how it could be a fake will when her lawyer literally said, oh yeah, she came to me a few days before her death and got a new will made up. Unless her lawyer is somehow the murderer and somehow going to get some of her money. But
I would expect we would meet the lawyer soon then if he's going to be a suspect.
Well, we saw him briefly in that one episode when he came forward with the will, or when he was being questioned by, I think, Cruz. I don't think it was Julia or Mason. Speaking of wills, Sophia has Mason over to go over her new will. And he's surprised she's left something to Cece, and even more surprised to find she's left something to him. She says, oh, I'm not leaving it to grown-up Mason, I'm leaving it to the Mason I once knew as a boy. But he's not quite smart enough, I guess, to pick up on the fact that she's making a new will because she might be dying. So maybe it'll cross his mind later. But he's happy to do this favor for her. So it's nice that the relationship between Mason and Sophia might be, calming.
Mm-hmm.
So Mason leaves, running into Mark on the way out. Probably the last person either of them wants to see, since they're both in love with Mary, who Mark is married to.
Mm-hmm.
Mark is, of course, there to tell Sophia once again, you have to come in for your biopsy. Next time we see Sophia, she's talking to Mary, who has escaped the convent, just to try to talk Sophia into really going to get that biopsy. And, of course, Sophia says that she, isn't, she's currently single, and she is worried that she'll be alone for the rest of her life because no one will want her if she ends up having to have a mastectomy. So Mary talks her into going in by saying, do this for your children because, they don't want to lose you so early. Blank. Tim finds Mary at the convent, and Mason climbs over the fence, and we see location footage for Lane Davies. He is in front of a gate that says St. Anne's Convent, and he ends up climbing over a brick wall. I don't know if that fence was put up by the crew, or if that's a real convent in Santa Barbara that they filmed at. But he leaves a gift for Mary, and it's a candle. We don't usually have those at churches, so it's a rare treat for Mary. And she and her nun friend, who I think was named Anne too in the first episode, unless it's a different one, decide to spend a rollicking evening watching the candle burn, so they light it. That's what you do for fun in a nunnery, I guess.
Party at the nunnery.
They were both very excited. Let's burn it now. You can chime in with any jokes or interesting observations, or even questions at any point. Cruz visits Mr. Fowler, played, I believe, by Gino Conforte. I'll edit this out if that's wrong. And he backs up Kirk's story, of course, that he spent that night that Eden was attacked with Kirk for 2 hours designing this special necklace that he had made. Now, Cruz originally shows up pretending to just be interested in buying a similar necklace, although you'd think, when he saw which necklace it was in the photo, he'd immediately think, okay, this is what Kirk warned me about, right? So Cruz says, yeah, how fast can you make this? And, gives him a time. And I guess Cruz is trying to think, how long would it really take to make such a thing? He goes, well, it took you 6 weeks to make this one. He goes, well, no, it was ready, but isn't this the guy who had the heart transplant? I had it here the whole time. So, but then Cruz says, yeah, well, I would love to see your inventory book, your books to show that you had this in the inventory and when exactly you made it. He goes, oh, sure, come back with a warrant and you can see all of that stuff. So although that is a reasonable thing to say, Cruz immediately thinks that means that he's hiding something. So Fowler immediately calls Gina once Cruz is gone and says, oh, that guy was here and he had the receipt. And Gina says, well, can't you fake your records? And she goes, oh, yeah, I can, for $100,000. Kirk complains to Gina that she called him last night, but of course that was Cruz that was calling Eden. And Gina says, oh, it was probably Cruz or one of Eden's other boyfriends. And then Kirk tells Gina after this, conversation that he's had with Eden in the morning about things, that he's very sure that Eden is not having an affair with Cruz. And Gina says, I thought it was your heart that was transplanted, not your brain. And Kirk says, well then, how do you explain the fact that Eden and I made love last night? And Gina just laughs because she knows there's 0% chance that actually happened. And Gina tells them, well, that Mr. Fowler called and Cruz was definitely in there with that receipt. And he can dummy up his books, but it'll cost you $200,000. So after having made a cool, $13,000 from Kirk on the purchase of the necklace, she's now going to make $100,000 on the fake receipt, so she might be able to support herself for a few years on this
she
money.
should do well with that.
Now, I remember just last week Kirk told her he barely had $20,000 in the bank, so I don't know where he's going to get $100,000 or $200,000. But he didn't seem to think it was going to be an issue, right? He was like, "Oh yeah, you know."
Well,
Tell
if he
him.
hurries up and kills Eden, he'll inherit.
Oh, that's
Money.
true. But he says to Gina, "Yeah, tell Fowler to meet me at the docks. There's an out-of-service ferry that's being repaired there. Meet me there." So that's a very short amount. At 7:00, that's a very short amount of time to get $200,000 ready.
So keep on bringing
Yeah, that made me
Maybe
think
again.
he may have another plan. Kirk then tries to get Gina to give him the tape again, where he confessed to everything, and she says, "That's the only thing keeping me alive." He says, "Oh, no." He had a very good logic. He says, No, in a way, I'm much less likely to want to kill you if I have the tape." We see, after he leaves, where Gina has hidden it, because she checks out her hiding spot, which is in the fireplace around the edges. There's a little gap. But she takes the tape out up there, has it in her hand. So I don't know where she moves it at that point. But before Kirk left, Gina said that the only way that Cruz could have shown that receipt to the jeweler is if Eden gave it to him. So she's really pushing that Cruz and Eden, are a couple. Partly, I think, she knows she's right, but partly just to goad Kirk. Whereas Kirk, I think, is willing to believe that Eden is not cheating on him, maybe. Although, he heard those faked conversations between Cruz and Eden yesterday at the cabana. So Kirk goes to Eden and says, "Oh, I need that receipt for the insurance." And, of course, she's given it to Cruz, so she gives him some excuse as to why she doesn't have it on her anymore after only a few hours. But by the end of the episode, she's gotten it back from Cruz and hands it to Kirk. And we see Gina phone Haley and says, "Haley, I need you. It's a matter of life and death." So I'm wondering if she too thinks that maybe Kirk is not really going to get the $200,000 and he's going to do something else. And maybe if he's willing to kill the jeweler, he might just kill Gina too. I think Gina's worried, because I think Gina's supposed to show up at the boat too, I think, at the same time as the jeweler. So I think she's really worried he'll just take them both out. Which, I don't know, seems reasonable. Eden tells Cruz that once again, maybe they're wrong about Kirk. And Cruz suddenly has this plan that we hadn't heard of before, to hide Eden on the yacht. Now, I don't know if he was going to sail her out of town or just hide her on the yacht. That came out of nowhere, I thought, right at the end of the episode. He goes, "Come on, get going. We got to get to the yacht." And then we see Kirk in a boat at the waterfront planting a bomb. He's got a little suitcase full of dynamite.
And we were speculating on whether he had actually recycled that bomb of Marcello's that never got mentioned again.
I mean, those portholes, I thought maybe looked like the Capwell yacht, but then I remembered, oh, wait a minute, but he told Mr. Fowler to meet them on this disused ferry, so he might actually be on that disused ferry, and that has those gold portholes for some reason. So maybe he's hoping Gina and Mr. Fowler will board the ferry and he'll blow it up from a distance. But I don't know if they would tow a scrap ferry to the same part of the dock where the expensive yachts are located. But I'm wondering if there may be some fallout and the yacht could get damaged too or something. But maybe he is on the yacht planning the bomb. Maybe he's planning 2 bombs. I don't know. So, any guesses? Or have I basically covered it all?
You covered a lot of options.
So, tomorrow's episode, Wednesday, we will find out where that bomb is and if Mr. Fowler and Gina survive. Or if Gina somehow gets her $100,000.
Or if she gets blamed for Mr. Fowler's murder.
There you go. Could happen.
It could happen. And we'll see where Princess Diana is tomorrow, after we watch episode 452 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
He's my guest, Julia. He's an accused murderer. I could have been tomorrow's headlines. Who are your other clients? The Marquis de Sade and John Wilkes Booth? Are you through? I'm just trying to understand what could make an otherwise very intelligent, beautiful young lady act like an idiot. Ah, yes. Probably the easy charm, the handsome good looks. Deja vu, isn't it? Jack Lee all over again.
The federal government steps up its testing of milk following the Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched the astonishing episode 452 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, May 7th, 1986. We also watched Policewoman last night, and A. Martinez was on, playing a Greek guy for the first time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought this was like later in the 70s. I thought, well, this is kind of a minor role he's taken on, just playing the girl's fiance, right? And I thought, he's done bigger roles on Barnaby Jones and Hawaii Five-O. But by the end of it, we realized he was more important than we thought.
Yeah, this was kind of a unique role for him. He was actually the villain at the end of it, and we have seen him play villains before. But in this case, he was a very emotionally troubled villain who actually seemed to have some degree of multiple personality syndrome. Mm-hmm. And so he actually, what an interesting role for an actor. He actually got to play a couple of different personalities.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Season 4, episode, I think 5 or 6 we're on, 7, something like that. In Santa Barbara, Julia asks Pearl to talk to Courtney about her testimony. And Pearl says that David's still the enemy, and he's not does not want to jeopardize his good relationship with Courtney for that. David tells Julia that she and Madeline are so much alike. He's really flirting with Julia in this episode. She's kind of girlish in several scenes, I think.
Now, I would have really thought that, especially since he is definitely a potential killer, the fact that he's comparing her to Madeline, someone he may have murdered, would not be a turn-on. But Julia doesn't seem to see it that way.
I know, it reminded me of Peter calling everyone Kelly.
I just thought it was a little creepy, but Julia seems to be into that sort of thing.
Yep. Haley listens to her Walkman while vacuuming. I thought, that's an interesting character thing, but it was actually a plot thing, which we will see later. The police return all of Madeline's possessions, and Pearl and Courtney find Madeline's missing date book in her luggage, hidden underneath the lining.
And we were actually both speculating about this because neither of us really would have taken Madeline as a seamstress, but the only way to get into the book was to actually tear apart the lining.
Well, that's how they got in, but there may have been a slot that
secret
she could have slid it into that they just couldn't find. Now, who should wander into the Capwell house while this is going on but Lionel Lockridge, who observes what they're up to? And I immediately got some weird vibes. I'm like, is Lionel somehow involved in the murder? Lionel has a flashback right on cue of him with Madeline. I don't think we ever saw those two characters together in the same room, maybe even in the same episode, before she died. And she, in the flashback, is writing in that appointment book, saying, same time as usual, and one of them suggests they should restrict their meetings always to the bungalow. So this sounds like there was an ongoing thing between Madeline and Lionel. And I don't necessarily know if it's romantic because, as Cece suspected Madeline of maybe plotting against him with Grant, perhaps it's one of those things like with Elizabeth Peel where Lionel is actually plotting against Cece with Madeline, and maybe he had some plot against the West Coast Capwells going with her that may have gotten thwarted by the turn of events with Warren and Madeline's death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Courtney and Pearl leave the book unattended briefly, and Lionel rushes in and erases an entry. And then later in the episode, we see Lionel, presumably in his old house, burning a bunch of documents. And he says, "Good night, sweet Madeline." So Maybe this was some scheme that totally never even got off the ground that he burned the documents for. Maybe this is, nothing's actually been put in motion or whatever. But then that led me to think, well, what if Lionel was meeting Madeline in that bungalow, and Augusta followed Lionel there, and now she maybe is a suspect again. After that one weird line a few weeks ago where she just threw out for no reason that she'd never met Madeline.
Yeah, it's interesting to speculate. I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily completely unthinkable that Lionel was having an affair with her. I mean, remember, Lionel
Could
was
have been
fairly renowned for his affairs when we first met him. And he did have that weird, creepy obsession with Eden early on. So that's it is a possibility, but I felt, as you did, like it was more likely a business transaction with all of these documents he's been
It could have
burning.
been both, though.
Yeah.
And even if not, in addition to Augusta being the potential killer, Minx is a possibility now, too.
Yeah, she hobbled over there and
Yeah. Stop saying my son! Or was it stabbing? No. Was she shot? Stabbed? Bludgeoned? Bludgeoned. Right. I don't know. That doesn't sound very Minx. At Pearl's fake apartment, he and Courtney are deciphering the code in the book. They realize that Madeline has used names from Dickens, and there is a man called Fagin who was in the bungalow that day. He kicks Courtney out of the room briefly so he can go to his real apartment. But she runs into Julia in the hallway, and they both go back in, find Pearl missing, and Julia says, "Oh, I know where he is." And she shows Courtney into the closet that goes between the two apartments. And I thought, oh, they're going to find out Pearl's secret apartment. But nope, Pearl pushed them both out and made them close the door. And while he was working away at breaking the code, Courtney was going to, hinting at something to Julia. Oh, he's got some past that's a lot different than what you think. And Pearl, got her to shut up about that.
mm-hmm.
But at the end, Pearl has decoded the message and shows Julia the paper of the man on which he's written the name of the man that Madeline called Fagin. And we do not see that name, but I suspect it will say Lionel Lockridge in the next episode. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see well, no, he's burned all the papers. If his story was, oh yeah, we were working on a scheme, he won't have any evidence to prove that. So yeah, this May Sweeps is heating up there, and we get some exciting twists in the Madeline murder. It's a very odd format for a murder mystery, soap opera-wise. I don't think I've ever seen this, where weeks later, another player is just suddenly shown as having been involved like that.
I was thinking, when Lionel walked in, it's so funny because when we first started the series, there was this whole thing made about how the Lockridges never entered the Capwell house, and they hadn't been over the sort of fence for like decades. And now we learned that they could just walk in at any time. It did occur to me that C.C. Capwell, the billionaire, has far worse security than we do.
He's moved all his security to the Lockridge house, maybe, after Ted's suggestion. Presumably, Eden is now on the yacht, because she's not in this episode, and Cruz never mentions it again. And we find out that Kirk is definitely on the ferry and not on the yacht, and he plants a bomb. Gina, in a black wig, and Fowler show up, and he is played by Gino Conforti, as I had previously thought. They arrive at the ferry to wait for Kirk, and Kirk's like cackling outside. And it goes off. It's a time bomb, so he doesn't have to be there, so he leaves, probably to get himself a good alibi. And Fowler shows Gina the gun he plans to use on Kirk if he doesn't show up with the money. And he knows that by now Cruz is searching his office, so I think he plans to leave the country with that money. In Buzz's, Pearl is entertaining a potential buyer for his ferry, but upon inspection, the buyer feels it's too small. So here we have some tension as Pearl and the buyer, Myers, I believe, show up on the ferry, and Fowler and Gina hide in the cupboard. And as Pearl's showing around, he moves some things on the shelf, revealing the edge of the case that has the bomb in it, and he's showing them all the closets, and he opens one, and the camera sees Fowler and Gina hiding in there, but no one spots them. Anyway, as the ferry's too small, the Pearl and the buyer leave the ferry. Back at the Capwell mansion, no, first he's in the Lockridge house. Kirk finds the tape, and back at the Capwell house, he borrows Haley's Walkman so he can listen to the tape. And the tape is a message from Gina telling Kirk he has the wrong tape. And if anything happens to her, it will be sent to the authorities. So now Kirk has to rush back to the ferry to try and save Gina. As he races in, Fowler keeps trying to push him for the money. He's like, I don't have time for this. It punches Fowler in the stomach, and Gina realizes, oh, there must probably be a bomb on this ferry. I better get off. But Kirk runs off on his own, and Gina actually helps Fowler off the ferry before it explodes. So he says, oh, I won't forget this. The bomb explodes, and we see people in Buzz's place looking out the window in horror. Gina gets into Kirk's car and shows Kirk the safety deposit box that the authorities would have found on her body if anything had happened to her. And Kirk decides, oh, we should swing by the bank and get that tape. But Gina pulls out Mr. Fowler's gun and points it at Kirk and says, I'm going out of town, but when I return, you're going to pay. After calling Haley from Buzz's, which is at this point crawling with police and looky-loos, Gina hitchhikes to Mexico. The trucker who picks her up tells her all about this woman he picked up once who had amnesia, and Gina hatches a plan.
Yeah, you can see the little light go off in her head.
Yep, so she will find a way to maybe get word to Santa Barbara that a woman with amnesia has turned up. Maybe she'll, plant some evidence on herself that links her to the Capwells, and then maybe just wander into a hospital dazed or something down south, and just let them work it out from there,
Yeah. There's all kinds of ways she could play it. That'll be, I'm sure, quite fun to watch.
Yeah, and she can avoid answering awkward questions, too, by feigning the amnesia. Goes back to, however, she could pretend she thinks she's still married to Cece.
There you go.
And then, really, she can avoid answering any awkward questions about anything that happened after that.
It's like pressing a rewind button, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I was thinking, this is actually the second time in a few months, maybe 2 or 3 months, that we've seen Kirk run away from an explosion that he's created.
Yeah, that's true. It's a couple of times he's had a gun, but he's never actually used the gun. He's always ended up going for the explosive. So Kirk was actually pretty dumb with this, not like trying to kill off Gina before he has the tape,
Yeah.
Plus this Haley, right?
Yeah, exactly. Plus, as we've discussed many times, tapes can be copied.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if I was Gina, I'd have one copy with Haley, one in the safe deposit box, one at the attorney's office.
Yeah.
While searching Fowler's office, Cruz, which I guess he must have had the warrant by then, but the way it shown, it was like he sneaked in. But Kirk plays the answering machine just to see what's on there, and there's a message from Gina, but Cruz does not seem to recognize Gina's voice, but he's more interested in the phone number that Gina leaves for Fowler to call her back at, because he thinks it seems familiar, and when he calls it in, he confirms it's the Lockridge house, which, of course, is a very strange thing.
And we do get a short little bit, do we not, where we meet Fowler's receptionist.
At the end.
At the end, yeah.
Santana is unable to get Cruz to meet her and Brandon for dinner at the Orient Express, but Kirk spots them there, and Kirk asks her where Cruz is, and before she can really answer, Brandon says he's out fighting crime. Kirk says, yeah, I never can find Eden either. Kirk says it's nice for Santana to have her decorating to keep her busy during those long hours when Cruz is away. So he's really trying to sow the Eden and Cruz are together thing in Santana's mind. I wonder if he's going to try and pin something on Santana that he's
that's a
responsible
possibility.
for. Because he calls the casino and says he wants the place completely redecorated, and I know exactly the person to do it. So far from the casino being burned down as I thought it was going to be, now it seems like it's going to be redecorated and revamped. So
I was actually really glad to be reminded of Kirk's role, which is actually to manage the casino he's taking over from Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of nice to see him finally doing his job.
Mm-hmm. At least with the casino, he can be away from his job all day doing other stuff, but it's not really obvious to CC, whereas with the hotel and stuff, I mean, CC could constantly be coming to look for him, at the main offices. Where's Kirk? But the casino, it's like CC's not expecting him to be around. He wouldn't know if Kirk was blowing off his duties, and he could probably go to the casino at midnight and work on stuff all night to catch up, That potential buyer for Pearl's Ferry tries to pin the bombing on Pearl by saying, "Oh yeah, he was talking about insurance and stuff like that." But and he's telling this to Cruz, but Courtney tells Cruz that that's nonsense. And Pearl says he wouldn't torpedo his own boat. David shows up there and puts his arm on Courtney, and she says, "Don't touch me." And then they give Cruz the date book. And Julia immediately says she wants to see it. And Cruz wonders if they've had time to make a copy of it. Cruz calls the Lockridge house again, this time from Buzz's. And Haley answers, thinking it's Gina calling back. But she quickly comes up with a story and tells him that Mr. Capwell wanted me to clean the Lockridge house. Mm-hmm. So she now has a good reason for being there for anyone but Cece, I guess. Later, Cruz startles Haley by showing up at the Lockridge house. And he asks her if she ever uses that phone to make calls, and she says no. Then he asks if he's ever seen anyone else use it, like Kirk Cranston, maybe. Cruz calls Fowler's number from the Lockridge house, and Fowler is packing a bag and ignores the call. Cruz returns to Fowler's, only to find Fowler's secretary / I want to say girlfriend, crying because Fowler has gone to Las Vegas, and she knows the address, so she's about to give it to Cruz. So it's not like he's left the country and is ungettable. So we may see Cruz showing up at his place in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I like the way, when Cruz asked where Fowler may have gone, and you're kind of expecting this is going to be a long hunt. And she just says, "Oh, I know exactly where he is. He just goes to Vegas whenever he wants to get away."
Which is what makes me think that she's his girlfriend, too.
Yeah, exactly.
And as if Cruz hadn't had enough to do in this episode, he has to talk to Brandon about a fight that he's gotten into because someone has been calling Brandon names because his mother is Mexican, and they've been saying things like, "Well, your father must be a gardener then," because that's all Mexicans can do. Oh. So this is really the first real acknowledgement of Brandon's half-Mexican heritage.
Yes, he doesn't look Mexican. He looks a lot more like Channing.
And Cruz says to him, "There's no point in engaging with people like this, because where's it going to go?" So he actually makes a good point. But he says he will show Brandon how to defend himself if it ever comes to that, as long as he promises never to initiate a fight. This is actually good. Brandon's actually maybe got a little bit of a good storyline here, although maybe this was the whole of it. A little bit different than wandering out on the ledge, high on pills and things. So.
I think this showed some nice bonding between Cruz and Brandon, and I think that might be influential later when Eden is finally free of Kirk and wants to get together with Cruz. And if Cruz has bonded with Brandon, it's going to make that even less likely at this time.
Yeah. Interesting to see how long it takes Gina to come back to Santa Barbara as the newly amnesiac Mrs. C.C. Capwell. A lot of things happening that, are exciting for the May sweeps.
It'll actually be really interesting if she comes back as an amnesiac to see how that plays out with her relationship with Brandon.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. She may end up having to lie to him. Oh, yeah, but if she claims this goes back far enough, she says, "Oh, I've never authorized my son to live with Santana and Cruz." So, and we'll see how that affects her relationship with Kirk. Kirk will immediately assume she's faking, of course, but maybe she'll pretend to have amnesia when she's talking to him, too.
Yeah.
And we had some credits today, and when I looked through them, they seemed fairly straightforward. At the end, we had 5 names. Madeline Capwell-Laurent by Terry Davis as a non-regular. Jeweler Fowler, Gino Conforte. Myers, that was the boat buyer, Paul Link. Trucker, Jim Oak. And Secretary, Joan Roberts. But to my shock, when I actually went to double-check every credit to make sure that no one's spelling had changed, there are now 3 fewer people in the cast.
Ooh.
3 people have been removed. John Allen Nelson as Warren Lockridge, not surprisingly. But, to my surprise, Sam Williams, Ty Henderson, is no longer in the credits. Which is interesting, because we thought there was going to be a bit of a turnaround for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps the biggest shock, Amy Perkins Wallace, Carrie Sherman, is no longer a cast member of Santa Barbara.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they bring her back as a day player for 1 or 2 episodes, or if they just kind of write her out in the same way as they wrote out Jade and say, "Oh, isn't it nice that Amy's gotten to go and spend time with Jade, wherever Jade is."
Mm-hmm. So Minx is in Jade's room, and Lionel can stay in Amy's room with Brick and the baby living in the house with Marissa.
Yeah.
That Perkins house has seen some upheaval.
It must be bigger than it seems.
Well, they had to turn the dining room into a nursery, so so that was a bit of a surprise. That one. We'll see how things go as this week goes on. We are coming up on a Thursday episode, May, episode 453. So we will see you after we view that one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
When the Princess of Wales collapsed inside the California Pavilion yesterday, the international media took the opportunity to speculate once again whether Diana was pregnant.
Welcome back!
Hello.
We finished episode 453 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, May the 8th, 1986. The other night we were watching Hill Street Blues, as we do every Thursday, and Paula Kelly was on as the mom of a kid. And we saw the movie 1 Million BC over the weekend, and Martine Beswick, who played the assassin that tried to kill Kelly Capwell, was the, I guess, second most prominent female character in that movie.
I think she was in a kind of leather bikini, whereas Raquel Welch was in a fur bikini.
They had a scene that was similar to Martine Beswick's scene when she was a gypsy in that James Bond movie and had to fight another girl for James, I think. So I guess she's used to fighting girls in pits. Hey, Mason, Sophia, and Mary got a location shot this week at the convent. So I don't know if this is Sophia's first location shoot. Mason sneaks back into the convent around the same time as Sophia shows up to have a chat with Mary about her impending medical procedure. Mason steals some laundry from a laundry truck and dresses as a priest and wanders the grounds, narrowly avoiding Sophia and Mary a couple of times, making jokes to some nuns who don't seem to be too worried they don't recognize him, and wanders around inside, just barely misses Sophia in the chapel, and has to duck behind a pew when Mary comes in, and she sees the chalk artwork that he's drawn on the wall. So the only thing I can think of is it's going to end up with Mary accidentally confessing to Mason.
Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting twist, and to actually hear what she ends up confessing to him, because, you know, she has actually already revealed quite a bit to him, actually, so it'll be interesting to see what else she might tell him.
Mm-hmm. Cruz meets Santana at Buzz's, where everyone hangs out now. She's a little pissed off that he didn't have a chance to tell her that he was going to Las Vegas last night. Says Brandon was upset that he wasn't there. I was just so busy on this case I forgot to call. Santana says, "Didn't you tell Eden when you were going to stay out all night?" She does immediately apologize for that, but I think it was well deserved, Cruz. Santana then finds out that Kirk is the one who wants to hire her to remodel the casino. That's who she was waiting for at Buzz's. I guess she just hadn't heard Kirk took over the casino. She ends up showing him some preliminary drawings, and he asks for more of a certain style that he liked. Santana later tells Cruz about that job for Kirk, and he's very upset. Mm-hmm. And of course he can't tell her that he thinks Kirk is the one who tried to kill Eden, but he just says that Kirk is dangerous. So I'm not sure what Kirk's reasoning is for hiring Santana. I wonder if he's got another scheme involved that involves some sort of trap at the casino so that he could kidnap Santana to have something else to hold over on Cruz. But, you know, if it comes to that, he's pretty much, jail-bound if it doesn't work.
Yeah, I was wondering that myself, because actually it's not really, from what I can see, in Kirk's interest to put a wedge between Cruz and Santana. I mean, as long as they're married, that kind of makes his marriage to Eden a bit more safe, I would think. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's got some nefarious scheme.
It definitely feels like it's a plan.
Yeah.
Maybe he just plans to have her witness something between Cruz and Eden. Although that would still end up breaking her up from Cruz, which is, once again against his interests. Justin, the almost psychiatrist, tape records his diagnosis of Kelly, and she knocks on the window because she's locked herself out. He quickly hides all this stuff, but I just have a feeling Kelly might find it one day and be very angry that he's secretly been a psychiatrist this whole time.
Oh, I think so. I think that's what they're setting up.
But he goes ahead and does some psychiatry by suggesting that they pretend that he is Peter, so she can confront her fears. Now, I think he's really overstepped the bounds of just listening to suddenly doing psychiatry, when he previously told Nick, well, I can't practice psychiatry yet.
Yeah, this seemed very much like a therapy session more than just sort of a chat session between friends.
Mm-hmm. So she confronts Peter about killing Joe, and then she says she won't let Nick be hurt, and runs out of the room. So that's interesting. So I guess that's her fear, is that Nick will be hurt, presumably by Dylan. Justin follows her to the cemetery, where she shows him Joe and Peter's headstones. And Peter materializes on his headstone. Once again, a sadly short appearance by Stephen Meadows in this episode.
Yeah, but the fact that they keep bringing him back, I think really just justifies for us when we were watching that first, I guess, half of the first season, just what a great character he was.
Justin tells Kelly it's not her fault. Kelly says it should have been her. So maybe I think that's why she feels like, Joe's death is her fault, because Peter wanted to kill her, not really Joe. And she says she never really loved Peter, so she was just, I guess, doing that to please her dad, being engaged to him. Justin says that she's not the reason that Peter was irrational, and he also then says Nick and Dylan have had problems long before you as well.
Yeah.
And Nick is not going to kill Dylan. So I guess Justin's got from this that she's worried that Nick will kill Dylan.
I actually feel like she's worried that she will kill Dylan.
Yeah, maybe she is hiding from him. You just don't have that kind of power, he says. You can't turn a good man into a killer, and you can't cure a sick one. So, possibly a very productive therapy session, albeit illegal. Detective Gomez questions Gina, who claims amnesia and has been found in Tijuana. But she very quickly leads them to the key around her neck, which belongs to a safe deposit box in the city of Santa Barbara. And before long, Cruz arrives in Tijuana, and he immediately suspects Gina is faking her amnesia. So he was nice and surprised that she was alive. Kirk places a bug in the cabana. Interesting. He wants to hear what Cruz and Eden are up to. So, if their next incident there goes like the last ones, it'll be very obvious to him that they're faking it. Because even though they always, pretend to be lovers whenever Kirk is hiding under the window, that's only because Nick is radioing them saying Kirk is there.
Yeah.
But while he is hiding it, Ted and Haley approach, and he quickly hides outside, and he realizes that Haley is about to tell Ted that Gina was his aunt. And Kirk bursts in to stop her. And when Kirk goes to he goes to get the phone, he tells Haley, they're going to fire you immediately if they find this out. But when when Ted gets off the phone, he's got good news that Rosa had just called. Gina is alive! Ted, Haley, and Kirk go back to the Capwell mansion. Santana arrives, and before anyone can tell her the good news, Cruz walks in with Gina, and Santana goes, ah! That was a well-deserved reaction. I'm glad that they gave us that beat. I mean, of the most surprised by Gina's being alive, I guess Kirk, Santana, and Eden will be. Oh, and we'll probably have. They're saving Cece for another day, because he will be the most happy to find that Gina is alive. But probably the same day Brandon will find out, or they'll forget to tell him for a few weeks, like they do whenever someone. Did they even tell him Gina's dead? they hid that from him for several days. So. Kirk immediately thinks she's faking and tries to get her to reveal herself. The lights go out, and when they come on, Kirk and Gina are gone, and it appears to us that he's dragged her out to the front steps and tries to get her to drop the act. But she gets loose from his grip and runs inside, where she talks to Cruz, and Cruz says that he knows she's faking it, but she can trust him. And she says, I do trust you. And I felt like there was a good chance that maybe she was about to, come clean to Cruz. But, of course, Kirk was right outside the door, and he simply had to step back inside. And, he was in earshot of that conversation. So I think Gina will not be able to say anything with Kirk watching, because I think she really wants him to think she has amnesia.
There were a couple things that I didn't really expect from that whole scene when Gina came back with amnesia. First of all, she took her amnesia back quite a bit farther than I would have expected, to the point where she didn't seem to recognize Brandon, which I thought was odd, because this would actually have potentially been an avenue for her to get Brandon back.
She's doing complete amnesia, where she doesn't know who she is at all.
Yeah. And the other thing that I sort of thought was, I did almost kind of wonder why Kirk was pressing the point so much, because whether she's faking it or not, if she's sticking to this amnesia story, he's in the clear, is he not, with all the stuff he's been doing? She can't really hold anything over him, because, you know, theoretically she doesn't know anything about it.
Yeah, I don't know why Kirk's so adamant about this.
Yeah, I mean, really, it would seem to be a bit of a gift to him, whether it's genuine or not.
Because they were, in fact, planning something for Gina to make her return to life, so I don't see why we wouldn't just go along with it and see how things go. And that is it. I sort of included Ted and Haley's various scenes throughout, but they were just minimal. Is this our fourth chapel? We had Joe and Kelly's fake wedding. Not the one underground. We had Joe and Kelly's fake wedding at a chapel. The one Kelly threw for Joe. Anyway, that didn't go through. Then Joe and Kelly's real wedding. Then Cruz and Santana's wedding was in Guadalajara, was it? And now we have the chapel of the convent. So we've had at least 4 chapels. Although I'm not quite sure if the chapel where Joe's funeral was and where Gina's funeral was is the same one where Kelly and Joe got married. Maybe it just looked bigger because they had a wedding and a bunch of guests, but maybe it's actually the same one. So anyway, it's at least our 4th chapel on the show. And presumably it's the same pews with a slightly different set decoration. But
it'll be interesting at the end to tally this, and I'm sure someone has the number of weddings and events like that at the Capwell Hotel versus the number that have been in chapels, because Mason and Santana's wedding that didn't happen, I think, was at the Capwell Hotel, and so was Cruz and Eden's wedding that didn't happen. So.
Did we have one in the Capwell atrium yet? Not yet. I think we've got one. At least one happens in the Capwell atrium at some point.
So yeah, we've got and I'm trying to remember where Cece and Gina got married, and I guess Kirk and Eden were at a chapel.
Cece and Gina. Maybe they got married in the atrium. I don't recall. And that is it for this episode. Now we've got a Friday episode during May Sweeps coming up, so I guess the big thing will be CC finding out that Gina's alive. I think that'll be the thing I'm most looking forward to. And will we see any Lockridges again? Will we ever see any Perkinses again?
Where were Nick and Kelly supposed to be married? Was that?
In the gazebo.
Oh, that was the gazebo.
Yeah. Keep a running tally. I wonder where Dylan and Kelly was supposed to be married. I wonder where Peter and Kelly were going to be married. All right, that is it. We will see you tomorrow after we watch episode 454 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've finished episode 454 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Friday, May 9th, 1986. What a weird week it's been, living in 2 different time periods. At the start of the week, in 1986, I met Prince Charles. And today, in 2022, he became the king.
King Charles III.
So that's weird, all these parallels that are happening in our shows. Back in 1986, Kelly says to Justin that a weight has been lifted off her mind. She asks Justin to have Nick come over while she takes a nap. She dreams of being in a wedding dress, while Peter tells her he does all the forbidden, horrible things that she can't do. I'm a part of you now, Kelly, he says. Kelly says, goodbye, Peter. I'll never see you again. And he fades away. So Kelly is mentally cured. Justin tells Nick that Kelly has a fever. And she does wake up and say hi to Nick, but they don't really get into why she's called him over yet. So we'll find out in the next episode, I presume.
I'm assuming that just as she's about to tell him, Dylan will burst in and everything will go to hell.
Yeah, we'll see if Kelly really is cured. We'll see how she reacts when Dylan shows up next time.
Mm-hmm.
Mary talks Sophia into seeing Mark for the biopsy. The results come quite quickly. It's stage 1 or 2 cancer. He suggests a lumpectomy followed by radiation. No, chemotherapy? I can't remember. One of the two. She's still worried about dying, as you might imagine. She goes to visit Cece. He is surprised by her appearance, and she says she doesn't want to talk about the future. She just wants him to hold her in the present. He senses that something is wrong that she's not telling him, but she won't tell him what.
And he does give her a hug.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very nice scene.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to get a feel that Cece and Sophia are being brought together by the writers. Mm-hmm. That's the sense I'm getting. Will Kelly and Nick get back together this week? We will find out. Mason avoids running into Mary for the entire episode, and finally ends up hiding in a confessional.
You called it.
Which Mary then enters and starts to confess to Mason. So I don't know how much more she can confess, really, that Mason hasn't already figured out. But it might give her a reason to be angry with Mason for a while, though, when she finds out.
Yes, I think that's probably the real reason they're doing it.
So they'll separate for a while, and she'll go back to Mark. That's probably what'll happen. David spends his day going in and out of room 830 of the Capwell Hotel. I don't think we even actually hear any dialogue. He's just constantly knocking on the door, and someone's in there. Nick follows him at one point. He's on the case by Julia, apparently. And he calls Julia on the well-placed phone in the hallway and tells her about room 830. And Julia wonders if that room belongs to Maddie Whitmore. Now, I think this is the first time we've heard of this Maddie Whitmore. I don't know where that's come from, but apparently Julia already is expecting a Maddie Whitmore. So I'm not sure what's up with that. It was all very mysterious. We never see the person inside. And eventually, one time David is gone, Julia shows up, knocks on the door, no one answers, and she breaks in and finds a photo of David kissing a dark-haired woman. Just as someone starts to come in, and Julia hides behind a pillar that doesn't look very large. But it is a very complexly laid out suite in the Capwell Hotel. And I don't know if we've seen we definitely haven't seen a suite at the end of the hall before. Maybe it was a little like the room Nell Carter was in, but even then I don't think so, because that had a huge living room. So, new layout for a Capwell hotel room, and a lot of, if it's just for a one-day set, they've done a lot of work and put in a lot of corners in it. Unless they've redressed one of our other sets that's somewhat convoluted, and they've managed to hide it well with little pillars and vases everywhere. That, of course, is on the same floor as the presidential suite, which is just a coincidence. It's not really relevant to anything, but we do see more adventures on that floor later in the episode. Gina sees Kirk, and therefore does not tell Cruz that she really hasn't lost her memory. Eden and Cece arrive and are shocked to find that Gina is alive. Of course, there's a lot of, you don't remember? Do you remember Brandon? Do you remember trying to kill me? But I'm just going to gloss over all that because it's kind of obvious. And if Gina just steadfastly pretends she doesn't remember, nothing's really moving forward in the plot. Cruz hides Gina in the presidential suite of the Capwell Hotel. Eden is quite angry that he's given her this expensive room to stay in on the taxpayer's dime. But then Cruz surprises Eden by showing her the secret two-way mirror that Peter Flint had installed all those months ago. Eden is shocked to find there's a two-way mirror leading to the presidential suite. I'm shocked Cece still hasn't had it removed.
Well, first of all, it's ironic she doesn't know about it because remember she was actually running the Capwell Hotel for a while, so that's kind of fun. But also, I was trying to remember if Cruz actually knew about it or not the first time around.
Well, Augusta showed Cece, and that's all I know about it.
So I'm not quite sure how Cruz found out about it.
But there's already a camera set up there, so he's been there earlier and set up, and he says it's going to be monitored 24 hours a day, or recording 24 hours a day with some occasional monitoring, perhaps. So if Gina slips up, they will catch it. They watch Kirk arguing with Gina, and Gina, of course, keeps up the pretense that she's lost her memory, but Kirk says a lot of borderline incriminating things that probably aren't enough in court to convict him of anything. But he does more than just try to get her to remember. He says a lot of things about the day Eden was shot, but I think he dances around it. And I almost get the feeling that at one point he was looking in the mirror. Cruz says to Eden, don't worry, he can't see us. But then Kirk suddenly changes his way of speaking to Eden. He, from this point on, doesn't reveal Gina. From this point on, doesn't reveal anything that could potentially be harmful to him. So I wonder if he suddenly suspects that there's that it's a two-way mirror, because he's well aware that Cruz is the one that put Gina in there. It's an odd thing for him to do, so maybe he's put it together that people are watching, and so he actually tones down all the revelations stuff for the rest of this conversation. So he then shows up again later with Brandon, and without letting Brandon see Gina, he has Gina take a peek at him, and she continues to pretend that she has no idea who that is.
Now again, as we talked about last episode, I have no idea why Kirk isn't just going along with her.
Yeah.
So this whole thing about, he might be so clever to have ferreted out the two-way mirror. If he was clever, he'd just roll with it. And we wouldn't get any of the drama at all, of course.
He wouldn't even visit Gina.
Yeah.
Because in theory they have no reason to, talk to each other.
So.
And then Gina cleverly goes into the hallway and uses the same phone Nick used earlier to call Haley to just let her know for sure that she's faking the amnesia. So that, of course, will not be recorded on that video. I wonder if Gina suspects. Well, she probably suspects the phone is bugged. I doubt she knows that there's a camera back there. Who knows about the camera? Mason does. Peter, Cece, and Augusta. And Lionel probably too, right? I think Lionel and Augusta were briefly in there as well. Eden has some tricks up her sleeve, which we don't quite figure out till the end. At one point she hides a tape recorder in her breast pocket of her very colorful outfit. And we're not sure what she's doing, but Cruz comes over, and she, after the usual talk about Gina and Kirk, steers the conversation over to how much they want each other, and gets Cruz to reveal one or two things during this conversation. And I had forgotten that she was taping. Actually, I wasn't even clear if the tape recorder was on, but we find out later that it definitely was, because she goes to the cabana where she has found Kirk's bug already. And she knows it's there. And she just waits for, I guess, some indication that Kirk has shown up and is listening to the bug. Which happens soon enough, because Kirk drives Santana to the cabana. She says, there aren't any design places out here. And he says, well, we're taking a detour. Cruz and Eden have been secretly meeting in the Capwell cabana. And he pulls this briefcase up from the back, and she's like, "Did you bug the place?" And he pulls out some headphones and gives them to her. And so they listen in to what's going on in the cabin, and Eden takes the tape recorder out, which she has queued up, to a very salacious part of her recording, and plays that part of the conversation into the microphone, knowing that Kirk will hear it, not realizing that Santana will also hear it. And then Cruz walks in partway through. So he immediately sees what she is doing, that she's playing the earlier conversation into a bug that I don't know if he knew was there. Will he start talking and mess up the whole plan? Will he be quiet and make her just stop playing the tape? It's already too late for Santana. I think Santana and Cruz is probably going to be the biggest fallout from this event. Kirk, doesn't really have any more evidence than he already has had. So
It's actually kind of fun in a way to think that in a weird way Eden and Kirk have actually worked together on this, and are busy pulling apart Cruz and Santana's marriage, although that's probably not really what Kirk wanted, but it's just interesting they're working in concert.
Yeah, surprise bonus for Eden.
Yeah.
Fallout from that then would be Brandon, now that Gina's back. So Santana's maybe will be angry with Cruz, but realize she can't just dump him because maybe that would somehow put her position with Brandon in jeopardy. But I think she has an ironclad contract with Cece. I think if Cruz left, it would just be too bad. This is my son now. But who knows what clauses we're not aware of that could cause Cece to grab Brandon back. But would he really give Brandon back to Gina? Well, who knows?
Yeah, I do think Cruz has kind of put himself in the line of fire on this, though, being at Eden's beck and call and kind of rolling with her on these crazy ideas she's had, in pushing this narrative. So, although I do feel a lot of sympathy for Santana, I really think that Cruz has put himself in this situation to a certain extent.
I think happiness for Santana is definitely not going to happen this year.
No.
It's all going to fall apart, which it already had started right from the beginning. But
And actually, Eden's antics around this, and I imagine they'll increase. They're actually kind of reminding me a little bit of that show we used to watch, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, where this woman with a borderline personality disorder is pursuing this former boyfriend of hers, just to the actual extremes. And in this, this newer show, the disorder is accurately portrayed as a personality disorder. Here, for whatever reason, it makes even the heroine of the story.
Well, maybe years later, some writer will pick up on that and do a twist on it. But right now, Kelly is the crazy one, or maybe cured now. So we'll see. We'll see if it takes. Well, that's it for the week. There are actually fairly straightforward storylines and quite minimal events, actually, in each one. But they all kind of ramp things up enough for a Friday. So Sunday is Mother's Day in 1986. Will this be the last time I wear the carnation in honor of Peter Flint? He's been in the last 2 episodes and has possibly vanished for good. And we'll see if there are any Mother's Day mentions on Monday. Follow up to Sophia's Mother's Day. She might be in surgery, so that could be something that's mentioned, just like she found out on her birthday. That's it for week 93. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, not really.
We'll be back for week 94 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We will see you then.
Bye-bye.
Mary, you can't be a part-time wife and a part-time nun.